I wanted to simplify the process of activating your highest self and really your highest timeline in a way that I believe can be very simple and easy. Because ultimately, when I went full-time on YouTube and I began creating my dream life, it wasn't a whole bunch of intellectual ideas that led me to get there or to activate that energy. It was a few simple things that made all the difference that I could boil down to just a couple simple things. Now, first off, let me share a little bit of the journey of some of the things that really made the biggest difference. Now, one of them was, of course, something I've already talked a lot about, and that is the power of meditation. So meditation for me, back in 2012, was something I began doing, and I began to look at my life in a different way. I began to see and become familiar with this past version of me. The past version of me that was thinking, feeling, and acting equal to the reality that I was living. And that made me aware that I believed I was a 9-to-5 job goer. Therefore, what do you think my reality was? 9-to-5 job, right? Which means that part of that as well was I thought thoughts that were equal to that reality, I felt emotions that were equal to that reality, and I took actions equal to that reality. Those actions were, I went to that job, I'd go to work every day. It was a retail job where it was very slow, so we would complain about how slow it was. At the end of the day, I'd be tired. On the 2 days off that I had a week, I'd pretty much be just running errands. And that was my life because that's the belief system, the thoughts, the feelings, and the actions that I was embodying. Now, Joe Dispenza talks a lot about this. He says that meditation, the root of it and the meaning of it means to become familiar with. So on one hand, there's two sides to this coin. On one hand, you want to become familiar with the past version of you or the version of you that has been set in place because of past conditioning. So the current self or the limitations that we're embodying, we want to become aware of those patterns. We want to become familiar with what those patterns are. So meditation helps you become aware of how you are thinking, how you are feeling, and how you are acting. And then as you become aware of the energy that's inside of you, you then are becoming aware of the correlation between what you are thinking, feeling, and acting to what you are experiencing on the outside. Is this making sense? Yes. Awesome. So when we then become aware of this through meditation, through observing thoughts, which that was also the whole story of that, of becoming aware of the patterns from the whole ex-stepmom thing, the forgiveness. I was becoming familiar with what was inside that was simply I was unaware of. Now, one of the other things that I'll say about this past self, that I in 2012 did the meditation, started learning more about myself. Then eventually what happened is I started reading personal development books. One of those books is called Psycho-Cybernetics. Has anyone ever heard of that book? Nice. Awesome. Psycho-Cybernetics is a book, old school personal development book that has influenced a lot of teachers. Tony Robbins, a lot of the main motivational or personal development teachers you see have been inspired by this book. But basically, it was a surgeon who would do plastic surgery on people, and he would notice that if people came in because they wanted facial reconstruction, and he would do that and fix their face to whatever they wanted it to, they would fix and have it change on the outside, but they would still feel the same way on the inside. They would still look in the mirror and see their past self. So what he became aware of was this inner self-image that we all carry. And unless we change that inner self-image of how we see ourselves, that's what we project out to the world, and that's what we are thinking, feeling, and acting equal to. Is this making sense? So from that, there's something called a psycho-cybernetic mechanism, which is an analogy you can think of, like if there's a cybernetic missile and it's going somewhere, then what will happen is if it gets off course a little bit, it's got the parameters to get back on course to go wherever it's going. Does that make sense? It's like a set point. And when you become aware of your set point, you then start becoming aware of what's been subconscious. So I read this book while I was working at Nordstrom's and Women's Shoes, and one thing that I did is I started to use that material. I started to use it. I was like, what is my current self-image? And I realized that at the time, I had this self-image to where I was a mediocre sales employee. That job that I had was a sales commission job selling women's shoes. Every day we would go into work. I would go into work, and there'd be a list of the top salespeople from the day before. It was actually a list of all the salespeople and their numbers. And what would happen is I noticed that every day I would go in, I would look at the list, and I was always right in the middle. I wasn't at the top, but I wasn't at the bottom. And you had to make your numbers to keep your job, and you only got paid based on the commission you sold, But I was a mediocre sales employee, right in the middle. And what I did is I became aware that every day I come in, I see myself in the middle of this list. I have a self-image that says I am a mediocre sales employee. That was my identity. So then what I did is I started to become aware of this. I started to become familiar with that version of me. And then I was like, let me experiment with this a little bit. So what I did is I started to see myself as a top sales employee. I imagined myself going in at the beginning of every day, from looking at the sales from the day before, and I imagined myself looking at that list and me being at the top of the list. That was one thing I did. Now that's not enough though. You can visualize it. You could do the inner work to see yourself differently. But then what I began doing is I began behaving as a top salesperson. So what I realized that meant was I would ask myself this question: what does that version of me, how does that version of me interact with other people? Is this making sense? How does that version of me interact with other people? So what I realized is that there was, and when I would greet other customers, how would the top sales version of Aaron greet customers? Because I realized that there were other employees I worked with. They were very selective. They would say hi to customers that were wearing certain clothes. They were very like profile the customers and only help people that they thought were going to buy. Now, what I realized though is that that doesn't actually work. A lot of times the people that come in that also had the most money were people that came in gym clothes. The people that would dress up to go out to buy like a $500 pair of shoes or a $1,200 pair of shoes, the people that really were the best customers that made the quickest decisions were people that came in gym clothes, right? But also, that energy of that selectiveness was very judgmental, and I realized that the top sales version of me accepted every customer that came through the door and greeted every single customer, no matter what they look like, no matter any judgments about them. So what I started doing is I started greeting every customer. I started helping them, and I imagined that full-time, or that version of me that was helping them with shoes. Did that version of me just bring out one shoe? Was that version of me afraid to suggest other items? And what I realized is no, this version of me is bold and is like, oh, you wanted these, what about these and these or something? And I would then focus on, oh, this version of me also really is emotionally connecting with the customers, really cares about them, would give them great customer service. So what I did is I used this visualization and I began embodying that energy, and within a very short period of time, my name consistently was at the top of that list every morning when I came in. And it was a reflection of that inner work that I was doing, but also the energy that I was embodying. Is this making sense? So that energy dynamic, I remember switching things up, and even little things. There was an energy I remember where when I really over-delivered on adding value, people could feel that. And I would do little things like this. It sounds corny, but like I would put tissue in the box and like the bag, like over the box and stuff. Like these are things my other sales like friends or employees or whatever didn't do. And I would do little things like that, not because they're gonna like it and they're gonna come to me next time when they buy shoes. I lived in Vegas where there wasn't a lot of repeat customers. It was new people every time. It was a symbol of the kind of person that I preferred to be. Somebody that over-delivers, somebody that adds value. And that was a way of me embodying that energy of I am a top salesperson. I am somebody that over-delivers on value. I'm somebody that has fun with customers, that cares about them, and people could feel that. And from that energy of not judging, not selecting and profiling customers, there was a completely different energy. But I share this example because you can use this in any area of your life. Whatever you want to embody more of, think of even the little things. This doesn't have to be just Aaron, made videos on YouTube every day that changed his life. There's little micro things you can do that change your identity. Sometimes it's even the smallest little things. It's just that if you do them consistently enough, it begins to change your life more and more. So that was back in 2011, 2012, right around my spiritual awakening, and that started to shift my energy a lot. At the same time, I still had that 9-to-5 job. So I used it to upgrade my situation at the job that I had. But then what happened is I was on this path of spiritual awakening. I was on this path of watching YouTube videos. And then eventually what I thought of, once I was, I had a lot of blocks in the beginning. I had a lot of procrastination, a lot of perfectionism, a lot of things blocking me from making videos. But I eventually asked myself, what if I use that same exact process to become a version of me that there was a little bit more of a dramatic jump? So instead of me going from being a mediocre sales employee to being a top sales employee, what if I used it to become a sales employee of something I'm not that passionate about, to become a version of myself that is passionate about who I prefer to be? And that, in my mind and in my field, in my soul, I felt was somebody that was adding value with content, adding value with YouTube videos, because I was already watching people on YouTube. I was already consuming that content, and I thought, what if within myself, I could embody that energy? If I could think, if I could feel, if I could just simply make the choice that that's who I am now. That's really all it was, too. I made the choice. There were maybe blocks that came up. Maybe the old pattern came up. I made the choice to be the top salesperson. The next day, I come in. There's a pattern of certain people. Do I greet them or not? And then I'm like, oh, wait. Remind myself. This is who I prefer to be. Then I do it. So I'm not saying it was always it was just this thing that immediately I shifted and that was my reality. It was a decision that I made, and then it was something that I began moving towards. And the blocks that came up, I became aware of, but I stayed committed to that vision.